Hello, and welcome to Educational Triage, where we discuss issues in alternative education. This is a discussion about teaching, by teachers, for teachers, and others who are interested in the alternative education world. We hope you find today's episode relevant, engaging, and useful. And if you do, please subscribe. I'm Tony Hunt, and I'm here to help guide you with the help of my friends Christy and Philip. And welcome back to Educational Triage. Today I'm joined with Philip.
Aloha.
And it's just the two of us, it looks like, today. So we will just head out into them thar hills. And today's episode is, are charter schools alternative? And this is quite the conundrum, and it's also very enigmatic as far as what is a charter school and what is alternative school. So I am going to say that one official response I received was that there are many alternative schools that appear as charter schools and many charter schools that look like alternative schools.
What? No, I understand
Well,
what
that
you're
was
saying.
thoughtful.
Yeah. Okay, that was it. Now, next week's episode is... No, that's
So, well, first of all, I think what we
No,
need
it's
to
true.
do is we need to realize that what we need to realize is not every state recognizes charter schools as alternative schools.
No, they're not actually
So,
recognized as alternative schools per se.
but they are.
Yeah,
They
they
are.
are.
It depends on the state's definition and where they fall under that umbrella. In the general sense of it all, yes, they are alternative, but in the sense that it's an alternative to mainstream. So I think today we're going to talk about what are charter schools, what are some of the arguments around charter schools, and what are some of the ways that alternative education and charter schools align.
Well, yeah, my research as I went around and around with it kind of led essentially to different questions about charter schools and led then to my questioning the entire system under which charter schools and quote public schools, of which charter schools are considered public schools, at least by funding. So their structure may
Not
be alternative.
necessarily. Well, there are private charter schools.
There are, and that's a different. Well, that's true, but the thing about charter schools now, essentially, is that they're in the same funding pool as public schools. They take that same funding, and then they use that funding to come up with the funding for charter schools, which are awesome because charter schools, some of them use those funding. That funding to create great programs in schools essentially, not programs. And they use it, and the alternatives are all put in there. They're small environments, they're small numbers, all the key things are there. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, there's abuse with charter schools. There's ways where they're not for profit, but there's ways that they hire consultants that are profitable. And then there's ways that they make money on that. And there's also ways that charter schools like shut down in the middle of like school years and leave students high and dry. Charter schools, there's been charter school abuse in certain areas. And there's other dilemmas, that of the same charter school system being both very positive and very negative at the same time. It's very strange. I love them.
Well, I think it depends on who you speak to.
Well, I mean, for example, well, okay, not to get too political, in Michigan, okay, so don't want to drop the big name, the DeVosses. Okay, let's not talk about Betsy DeVos, but her husband, William DeVos, is associated with a charter school, and it's got an aviation theme to it. And the kids are extremely jacked about being there. They're in uniforms. They fly planes. I mean, if you're into aviation, I believe he's directly involved in this charter school. this is the place to be. I mean, you're in the classroom, the dress code and the uniform code, just the code of conduct is that of, you're flying a plane. It's not like a military, but the kids take it very seriously and they study really hard. And he's being interviewed and he says, yeah, I mean, this is a very, very, it's a good program. We cover, all the high school curriculum. Plus, we're teaching them to be pilots. These kids really study to get here. And it's a really good program. We got this, they show the school. It's beautiful. I mean, wow, I would love to go there. It's hands on. They fly planes. Instructors are top notch. And he said, "Who would not want to go here?" And I said, "I don't know if that's what you want to do. Who wouldn't?" And then on the other side, there was this woman that said, "Okay, well, so No Child Left Behind came along, and one by one, the schools weren't performing. They got closed down. Well, then the schools went away." She said the charter schools came in, and they said, "Yeah, well, we're your choice." And she said, "Yeah, you're the one choice." And so we got offered the one choice, the one charter school. And she said, then that came through, and then that shut down halfway through the one school year. So then we had to go to another charter school that was even further away. And so their choices were not, the high caliber aviation school. Their choices were sort of a come gets business model sort of charter school choice. And so you're looking at same state, Michigan, you're going, now it's not looking so good. It's sort of looking like one side's getting more shady and one side's the true way it should work, that one model by DeVos in the aviation school. And I'm thinking, dang, the whole system seems to be kind of like not equipped for small environment, focused learning like a real true alternative environment would give you. The ones that we kind of have a foundational belief in relationships first, focused study, small environment, small focused student led learning groups, things like that.
Okay. So I think you bring up some really good points on there, and I want to jump back to let's look at what is a charter school. What's the fundamental
Yeah, yeah. Let's look at what it
nature
is.
of what a charter school actually is? And it is, and
Yeah.
this is according to publiccharters.org. They are independently operated public schools that have the freedom to design classrooms that meet the students' needs. That sounds alternative, doesn't it?
Certainly does.
All charter schools operate under a contract with a charter school authorizer, usually a nonprofit organization, government agency, or university that holds them accountable to the high standards outlined in their charter. It is
Mm-hmm.
common to see charter schools led by former teachers who wanted to take the lessons they learned in the classroom and apply those lessons to an entire school. So, for example,
Yeah.
the aviation school, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Along the lines of, say, a
So,
magnet school. That would be, I would, something I could do. Yeah. Love that.
well, a magnet school is a little different.
A little bit, but it's a focus sort of. Yeah. Yeah. You're right. I
Well,
mean,
because a magnet school
that'll be
wouldn't be just aviation. I think my
true.
understanding is that a charter school operates under a theme, and a
Yeah. That would be a
magnet school
theme
would
school.
operate
Yeah. Yeah. I'd say a
right.
theme or a magnet.
And what they get, I know that here
Yeah.
that charter schools and alternative schools that are under the auspices of a public school
Yeah.
in our state
Yeah.
receive 80% of what it takes to educate a child in the
Yeah.
regular mainstream school that authorizes it, because this is how a private contract alternative school would get. And so they don't do anything, they don't get anything different than what those get.
Mm-hmm.
And then because the district keeps 20% for administrative costs,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
then they roll with it. Now, I do know that the unions don't like them because they're not paying into the union and that they don't have to
Aha.
be unionized.
There you go.
Sometimes the teachers don't need to be. Oh, I'm not sure about licensure for the teachers
No,
and the
they don't
staff.
need. I don't believe they have to have licensure.
Yeah, I don't
Um,
know if they have to have teachers' licenses or what's going on. I'm not really positive. But
in Oregon.
they do design everything
5,000.
around that theme. So for aviation, the math would
Mm,
be designed around aviation. The
yeah.
reading and writing would have something to do around that. They could deviate a little bit, but majority of everything that they do is about aviation.
Yeah.
A school but there are also charter schools that are
Mhm.
run by hedge funds, for example.
Yeah, because of
And
it's big business.
so
Education's
that
become
would
business.
be
Yeah.
right. And so that's the one that you're talking about where they could easily um, fold in the middle of the year
Hmm.
for
Yeah.
whatever reason. If it was, unless there was some reason why the state or the school district would shut them down. Maybe it's because they didn't have enough kids, or who knows?
And
Or maybe
that's
there
been
weren't
one of the
enough
complaints
teachers.
against DeVos, that the DeVosses and their ilk are making money off this, a lot of money.
Well,
Yeah.
they're gone. So
Charter.
but remember that charter schools suddenly hit with
Hmm.
by force
They did.
back in the 90s. And I do remember sitting around my dining room table with the latest version of the charter school bill in Oregon, which made absolutely no sense. I mean, it was incomprehensible, the things that what they were trying to get going.
Right.
Um, it just felt like a scam. And so there were three of us who met at my house and we rewrote the bill so that it made some kind of sense. And we turned that into the alternative ed organization's secretary. Um, we hired a secretary to work for
Right.
us, not necessarily the organizational secretary, and she typed it up for us, and then we took it down to present, and we presented that in the House subcommittee,
Oh, okay.
and it helped. Believe that that's one thing that helped. I'm not going to go any further than the fact that it may have helped because it put some salient thought into what was going on at the time.
Right. Yeah.
Um, but there were a lot of private contract alternative schools who were seriously considering going the charter school way
Huh.
and taking
Interestingly
that
enough, in
on.
Oregon, charter schools are 44% of them, 44.6% of them are rural, as opposed to 20.8% of them being urban and
Is that
19.8
right?
being suburban. Yeah. So
Where'd
the
you get that?
majority of them are serving white kids in the rural areas. Yeah. Of the 136
Maybe in some rural
programs.
areas,
Yeah.
because the interesting thing is that there is a huge um, school districts and some departments of ed are
Hmm.
worried because a goodly number of charter schools in the urban setting, they fear that they are segregating children of color,
Mm.
and that more children of color are in the charter schools, and it's taking away from their population in the mainstream schools. And so that's one argument that people have on them.
Mm.
I find that really kind of interesting, because if they're running from crumbling infrastructure, and maybe the parents feel that there is something better to be had
Mm.
at the charter
Calif-
school rather than in the public system.
yeah. California has the 54.2% urban. You would expect, you would think, you would assume,
Hmm.
if you would assume things. And they have a serious problem. But they also, the California funds 61% from districts for charters. So each district will fund 61% of a charter program. So
Mm.
that's pretty
Well, I
high.
know that our state does not consider charter schools. They're a completely different animal in our
Mm,
um, in our state. It used to fall
Ah,
under, we did used to have charter schools and homeschools under the alternative ed umbrella.
okay.
And then sometime between 2008 and 2000, and I'm going to take a gander, 18 or 19, something happened, and I don't know what, but they no longer fell into that category.
Huh.
So it's rather interesting, I think.
So there's no funding for charter schools. They have to be privately funded. I mean, there's no like district funding.
Well, the district funding would treat them as a private contract school. So yeah, there's funding because because if they're public, then the money follows the child, but only 80%. So
I see. Okay.
let's
I
say
see.
that it's $14,000 a
Yeah.
child or
I see.
whatever it is. Then
Hmm.
multiply that by zero point 0.8 and you have how much money that they're going to be getting.
I get it. Okay.
So probably around $10,000 per kid.
Hmm.
But the thing is the kids are getting they the majority of those the majority of charter schools, almost all charter schools, provide a college track for the students, and that's the end goal, is that the children will be put on a college track.
I get it.
So the quality of education that they're getting is, well, the parents are very involved. The students, many of them, if it's a good charter school, they go into a lottery, and so it becomes something that people really want. If you ever watch the movie, I believe it's Waiting for Superman. It goes through that entire process of that. And is that the right movie that I'm thinking of? Philip, now you're
Yeah, I believe it
frozen.
is. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, I
There
believe
we
it
go.
was. I was clicking around looking at figures here. Yeah, I was taken by the free and reduced price lunch stuff actually. Da-da. Um, there's a lot of free and reduced price lunch eligibility stuff going on with charter schools. I was just taken back by. You're right about free.
Well,
Yeah, Waiting for Superman. Yeah,
well,
it's
the
interesting,
demographics are really kind of surprising, but they
aren't
are
they?
parents
Yeah,
who want their children to find a way out of poverty, many of them.
yeah,
They
that
don't
makes
like
sense.
they don't like the they want their children to be able to be successful, and they don't see that happening for whatever reason in their
Parents,
public school.
golly, what are they thinking? I mean, these parents just want more for their kids. Jeez, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, and
exactly.
yeah, it seems to be interestingly enough that the populations that they serve are almost at least sort of typical. In Oregon, it would be white, and then in California, it was Hispanic. I looked up Michigan, and it seems to be black. And I looked up Hawaii, and
Hmm.
it's Asian Pacific Islander. I hate to be
Hmm.
typical, but I'm just anyone want to
Well,
guess on what Ohio might be? I don't know, but it's weird. Um,
I
yeah.
think the further east, because Oregon is only 12% black,
See, that's the thing. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying anything about
but
race, but there's
but
typical numbers going on here. Yeah,
and I'm not going to say that well, it may be predominantly white, but those demographics are changing. I mean, if we take a look at
yeah,
all of the alternative programs that we have around,
yeah,
the white population in those programs is going downward, and there are more and more
yeah,
students of color that are going in,
yeah. Absolutely,
and
I remember
to
that.
the point where even the Southern Poverty Law Center accused alternative schools of being a racist tool. But that's a
Yeah,
whole nother kettle of fish and
isn't
a
it?
whole nother argument. And so I don't want to use it as a blanket statement, but
Whew.
it's something else that we can talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I've got some
So,
ideas about that. We talked about the communities that got, we had
mhm,
communities and enclaves of certain cultures, and the food because of it was awesome, and it did have something to do with, hey, your sister goes here and you're going there because I don't want to drive you to the high school kind of thing, and that kind of did happen. They just
mhm,
applied there because the brother or the sister was there, and it was kind of a good placement. They weren't always disciplinary placements. They weren't these alternative programs, as we're saying, everybody, aren't always for bad kids. They're good schools.
No,
Yes. Yeah.
no, and
Yeah.
that the charter schools are not there for discipline. They're not
Yeah.
there for education loss. They're
Hmm.
not there for behavioral.
Yeah.
They are there for students who are geared and ready to learn
Right. And
and
just
want to
because they
move.
found them, groups
Hmm.
of kids of certain cultures found them and said, "Hey, this is the place to be." It is. It was
Yeah,
in our case, it was. So yeah. But yeah, I
and
digress.
the right and and alternative schools are schools for students who are faltering in the regular classroom, and because of that they're having discipline problems, they're having motivational problems, they're at risk of dropping out, and
Yeah.
those are not the students that you have in the charter schools. So it's that it's a completely different population is what I think what I'm trying to say here.
And who they congregate around, I can't recall. They congregate around these things. If they find the alternative programs and they find them comfortable, I can't blame them really. I did too. I
No.
loved it. Yeah.
Well, what works for one kid, and the parents are fine and they find that it's home. I mean, what else could you ask for than supportive parents who want to keep their kid in a program that they feel is successful?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
what better endorsement can you ask for? And I think the same thing, and reasonably so, is going for charter schools for the most part.
Yep. Um I believe that when I was teaching with the academy that did dyslexic, I was working with dyslexic kids. I believe that was technically a charter. It was a private academy, but it was working directly with dyslexic learners, which is a whole different way to learn.
Hmm.
I was learning.
Right.
Not being dyslexic, I had no idea. It wasn't my experience, but I can't imagine what it was like looking at letters and seeing a different code. That would be difficult.
Right.
I don't quite know
Right.
how to imagine that, but yeah, it was,
So,
yeah.
well, that's a theme. I mean, isn't that more of a theme that you can actually look at
Yeah,
and work with? And so that would be something, well, aviation for one, dyslexics. I mean, that's a specialized kind of service that you're providing for the parents and for the students.
it certainly was. Everything's sort of centered around it. I noticed too, there's something about it. Um, we were talking about culture and alternatives too. Was at the eighth grade level, some of the kids made decisions to go to either regular high schools or they went to alternative high schools or programs that were more mainstreamy. Um, they were larger or they stayed. And it was kind of a big choice at eighth grade. It was third through 12th that the academy served. I remember that last year, actually, when I was working there at the eighth grade level, some of them made the big decision to go to the regular high schools. And for someone with dyslexia, that's a big deal because they kind of struggle in a way that's more visible sometimes. And there's the stigma that went along with that. And they overcame that. It was kind of a big deal for them to go, I think I'm going to do it. I think I'm going to go out there and go to the regular high school and just kind of do that with my dyslexia. And then some they stayed and they said, "No, I like it here. I'm going to do it here, and I'm going to go to the college from here, things like that." So there was a
Yeah,
definite
well, different strokes for different
thing.
folks, right?
Yeah, it just definitely had a culture, a theme to it. Um, I
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a charter school model, but I think they both could be cousins, if not siblings. You're talking about,
Hmm.
are they alternative? Yeah, I think both are. Yeah,
But being able to do whatever it is that they go into the school for and feel confident enough, especially with dyslexia, to be able to go out and practice it. I mean, different people are at different stages for different things, right?
absolutely.
So, yeah. So, but are they alternative?
Yeah, I mean, aren't they? They were small
I
environments, focused, student led.
There's small environments. There's a smaller teacher to student ratio.
Certainly was.
However, it's more academic focused,
Hmm?
and an alternative school, many alternative schools are defined by their population.
True.
So there are no placements. The school district can't make any placements at a charter school. And they don't necessarily make a placement at all private contract schools that are alternative. However, an alternative school will take a child. I was trying to work this out
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
I was writing and writing and writing and trying to figure out how to use the language. An alternative school takes a kid from where they are and then begins to work with them because not all students come to us whole. Many of them have a lot of gaps. Many of them, maybe it's from trauma, maybe it's from a lot of moving, maybe it's who knows why, but they have
Mhm.
learning gaps. And so we work with them. Maybe they have some kind of problems that is not academic, but it's more social, emotional. Maybe it's, I don't know, mental. But whatever it is, we try to work with that student the best that we can to get them to where we can build up their confidence, we can build up their skills so that they can propel themselves forward. I believe that with charter schools, there are rules. Many times there's uniforms. Um, and if a student isn't making adequate progress, then I don't know that that student is able to continue. In an alternative program, they are worked with so that they can make that progress. But once again, if they don't do it, then there's going to have to be
Yep.
a process by which the student is put into another placement. I don't believe that they would do that with a charter school. I think they would simply say, look, you're not cutting the mustard. Either get on the horse and ride it, or you're going to have to find another stable, which, and I don't know that how often that would happen. That's something I'm not really positive about. But I do know that with alternative ed, we try to find the best possible placement for the student. We try to work with the student as much as possible. And no, it's not primarily academics and it's not primarily thematic, even though you might. For example, my program, the students are, we look at various careers and we send them out to internships and they work with the businesses and they learn different skills with those. And after 50 years, we need to do a little bit of retooling, but I believe that a lot of that is going to happen next year. And I won't be there because I retire in 2 weeks.
Yay.
But I've watched the process of the person who's taking my place, and it's really fascinating and it's exciting. But that's what we can do. We can take these things and we can work with the kids and we can take them and put them in an uncomfortable position that's still safe. And then they learn and grow from that. With charter schools, I think it's more of being back in the mainstream classroom, but with a smaller ratio of student to teacher, and the students are able to get more help, except for the virtual learning academies. Now, there are virtual learning academies that are charter schools.
Yeah.
And where they fall short is in the mathematics because they fall 25 points lower than students in the same math at the regular high school or at the regular school, which is fascinating.
Yeah. I have a sneaking suspicion about charter schools. Yeah.
What's that?
they they just seem as smooth as sandpaper. You, it it doesn't. I
Well,
don't like the idea of considering them alternative. They
because
just they seem capitalistic. I have a certain theory about the way things should be, and there's the public and the commons, and so when you're making a product, you have a product, and then you have things like that are bad inventory. And when you have bad inventory as a business person, you have to get rid of it. You know, it just has to happen. And when you are teaching, um, you have bad inventory, but bad inventory comes in the form of a human, and it comes in the form of a human
I'm
that's
not going to.
not like thinking at the grade level. And you go, that's not bad inventory. That's just somebody who's not quite making the grade level. So you can't treat them like bad inventory. So when it comes
Because
to
they're not bad
education,
inventory.
it's not. You have to invest in humans. And so you can't treat education like a business. And I think charter schools are a business model. And I think business models don't really function well when it comes to people. That's what I suspect is going on here. And that's been my kind of the way I've been thinking about this for a week and a half, looking into it. It just doesn't
I don't see
match.
it as a business model. I can't see it as a business model. I can see it if it was being
Yeah.
run by a corporation,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
it can be.
That's
But
kind of like,
but
but it's,
but that's
yeah.
atypical. That's atypical. You can't just it's like taking a group of students and throwing them all into one box. You can't do the same thing with charter schools.
But they seem to be kind of like capable of doing that sort of thing. They,
No
like you
more
said,
so
they
than a
can be,
private contract school.
well, the
How is that
private
any different than a
contract,
private contract school that
but a
gets the
private
same
contract
funding?
school shouldn't be there either, I don't believe. Simply
Why shouldn't a
because,
private contract school be there? Because they're not making the because the district isn't meeting the needs of the students.
well, okay, so fundamentally, I don't think there should be any profit margin whatsoever, and that there
There's
shouldn't
no
be any
profit margin
limit
because they all run
on
as
what you,
no,
well,
because
yeah,
they all run as 503. They're all run as private nonprofits,
yeah, but there was
and
an
they're funded
and
by
there.
private nonprofits.
Yeah,
It's
you
they
interrupted
can't be
the
run
end.
as a shell corporation.
Okay. There
I
was an
mean,
end. Okay, sorry. Keep going.
I don't want to put that out there in the universe. I mean, if
Yeah,
somebody
okay.
can show me where a school district funds a charter school that is run for profit,
Never
because I
mind. No,
think
no,
that
go ahead.
running off of
I won't.
you know
My point's gone. Never mind. Let's move on.
I
Never mind.
mean, I
No,
understand
I
your
had a point,
concerns,
and it
but
was never mind. I'll move on. Yeah, never mind.
okay,
It just doesn't work for me.
but
That's all.
okay, okay, because you see it as draining money from the
No, I don't think
schools.
you. I don't think that you can invest too much in a student, and I think that if you run anything like a business, there's you can invest too much into something, and I think humans, there's never a limit. That's all.
But I
And
think that once you
yeah,
start comparing it to a business, then you have to look at the
yeah.
corporate structure of our school systems.
That's why I'm saying it seems fishy. Yeah, it just seems too much
Well, I
corporate.
think the whole school system sounds fishy
Absolutely, that's what I'm saying. This
because
seems more
lately they've been
extremely
making
fishy.
teachers more into drones.
Exactly, and this seems more on that side of it. It seems more of a push toward it instead of a push toward the other side. Yeah, it just seems more
No, I don't see it that way.
automaton, and I don't know. It does have the
No, I think
possibilities of freedom, but I think it also has it hidden in it the more possibilities for abuse. That's all.
but I think you could say that for almost any alternative program as well.
Well, yeah. It's like you said when it first came out, the law was like, well, hey, this is pretty liberal and shady and a little bit vague.
Well,
Yeah,
the law was when it first came out, at least here in Oregon, was that if let's say you and I put our heads together, we came up with the idea of a charter school. And let's say that we wanted to do it around, I don't know, give it to, running. Let's say that we're going to do it because this is your thing
yeah, yeah.
on mountain climbing.
Sure.
Okay. And because I've been mountain climbing
Hmm.
and I almost joined the mountain climbing organization.
Mazamas.
But
Yeah.
but we do that, and then what we would have been able to do is, let's say that we weren't on good terms with the school district that we wanted to put it in.
Yeah.
We could go on vacation, you and I, and we could drive to Central Oregon and we could talk to the district there, and they'd say, "We love this idea. Where's it going to be?" And we say, "Well, it's going to be in the Portland metro area." And they'd say, "Oh, it's too bad it's not going to be here, but you know what? Maybe if it works there, you can start it up here as well." And we say, "Okay, great." Then we have their funding. We start it up wherever we're going to start it in the Portland area,
Yeah.
and the district that we are located is going to fund it. So let's say we bring that back now. We have the okay from Bend Lapine School District in Central Oregon. We bring it to Portland. Now, Portland has to fund our school. That's how it was set up.
I see.
Or we could have gone to a university. We could have gone anywhere. And it didn't matter where we were located. It mattered that we had the okay under the auspices of some entity dealing with education who said yes, but the district where we put the charter school was going to pay for it. So there was a huge disconnect with that whole.
Yeah. Okay. That makes, yeah.
So
Jeez. That's,
that
jeez,
was
man.
that was where we came in. But as a whole, um, I think that school districts have become far more corporate. But I don't think that charter schools are any more corporate than, or they're basically more mom and pop shops like private contract alternative programs are. That are
Yeah.
that are
Yeah.
if that makes sense to you.
Yeah. It just seems to,
But
yeah, it kind of uses market principles. I'm kind of going, I can see it though. It gives choice. That's for sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think
That's
that
for
we do
sure.
have to have we do have to have
Choice
choice
is good.
here. So
Yeah.
here's some things that I found, because charter schools are alternative ed, but they're not. They fall under the umbrella of alternative education in some states, but not all, depending on the state's definition of
There's
alternative
ways
ed
of getting around
and
funding
their
too in
view of
public
charter
schools with the
schools.
foundations, and that's
They
another thing
are
too.
they
But
are an alternative from mainstream
that's been
education,
uncovered. So
designed around a theme, and students are enrolled to engage in that theme. Alternative education programs can be designed thematically as well, but the curriculum is usually designed to meet regular standards and made to be accessible for the students who come in, and it's changed around and manipulated to meet their academic needs
yeah.
rather than the curriculum manipulated to meet the needs of the theme. Did
Yeah.
that make sense? Okay.
It does.
Curriculum at the charter schools has thematically designed curriculum and engages the students similarly as alternative classrooms. Parents and families are usually very engaged in charter schools, and many students in alternative programs come from homes where the parents and families are surviving, doing the best they can, but are not always able to support their student academically.
Yeah. Low
Yeah.
income and minority parents also struggle sometimes to get the type of information
Mm-hmm.
that they need to access to get those to those
Right.
schools too. Yeah, that's true too. There is somewhat of
They.
a sort of the socioeconomic gap where, like the schools, they are better in some of those
Mm-hmm.
socioeconomic gaps too. But
But what
yeah,
I will say is that charter schools tend to be sort of like free private schools.
Yep,
They're
they do
kind
have
of,
that form. Yeah,
they're in a sense a
they receive
free,
actually less public funding.
it's public funding.
More, yeah.
So they're a free private college prep program, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
Um,
they have to get you to the same standards for sure. Yeah,
yeah. And they both have a lower teacher to student ratio. Both can be contracted with the local school district. And then while both can be academically rigorous, alternative schools and programs tend to work with students to help fill in their learning gaps, work with the whole student, and create student-centered curriculum with which the student finds success. So that means that we want the students to find success. And the same thing with the charter schools, but they are working with students with possibly a presumptive supposition that the students can already meet the challenges that are in front of them or will readily be able to rise up to them. And with alternative programs, students may be lagging far behind. So, charter school students tend to be more on a college track, while alternative students can do this. They may tend to venture more towards blue collar work. And then both serve students of color, but charter schools are pointed to as being in positions of segregation, with more students of color going to these sites rather than remaining in the mainstream. So, district leaders fret about losing diversity. And that goes for both alternative and charter schools. In fact,
Uh,
if you are talking about the RAPSA conference, which is Reaching at Promise Students Association, you will find that a good majority of those charter schools are serving students of color. Um, Charter schools are more easily conducted as online than a typical alternative program, which tends to be personalized, personable, and right there and accessible. Because even if you do an alternative program that's online, there's still caveats that there has to
huh,
be
okay.
one-on-one work
That makes
or
sense.
in-person work that happens at the same time, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And then charter schools tend not to need social services presence for its students as much as most alternative schools require or need. Because that's another because alternative schools do tend to require the access to social services, medical, and a lot of other services for their students. And
Yes.
while I'm not making the presumption that children in charter schools don't need any of that, it seems that they are far less likely to have families that are in such dire need, or the students are in such
That
dire
makes
need.
sense.
So, um, what's really interesting too is that, and I've asked around and I've not really received any kind of remarks on this. There was a New York Times article the other day. I think it was, no, it was the Washington Post, where they're talking about the Supreme Court is likely to drop a bombshell on school vouchers. And I'll put that
Hmm.
in the comments below for people to
Yeah.
read and see what it is. So, anyway, so they're aligned so closely, but there are differences. Yes? No? What do you think?
Yes and no. I'm my mind's made up both ways again. I am yeah. It's a conundrum because yeah, there's ah I
Mhm.
like it and I don't. And yeah, but it's like yeah, I'm firmly both feet planted in the air. There's a lot of promise and there's some abuse and yeah, it seems to be. I like the idea of the focus. I like the idea of the promising the conference for the promise. I like the I just like the idea. I would like to do a charter school. I don't like the depletion of some of the school district funds. I know California is having a real hard problem with charter schools. I don't like some people swooping in for profitable consumption of funds and then leaving town. I don't like the business models. Yeah, so go ahead.
Well, that said, I'm putting a bunch of
Yeah.
articles for people to read down in the comment section, not the comment section, but down below in the show notes. And then my question to everybody is, what are your thoughts on charter schools? Should they be counted as alternative education? What do you believe about charter schools? Because like everything, there's a double-edged sword, right? There are many positives. It does help a lot of students. Whether or not their scores, I don't know whether or not nationally they can be. If you go with the virtual, yeah, some of the scores go lower. If you go with the local, it might be, they might actually be bringing up district scores. Who knows? But math is the ones that seems to be the problem. But that only came out with the virtual. It didn't, I could not find anything that it said, and I'll do some deeper digging for the in-person schools. So I think it teaches rigor. I think it teaches discipline. I think it teaches students to be academically ready. And the behavior, I think, in those schools might be somewhat better than perhaps in a regular school. And I do know that in an alternative school, in a private contract alternative school, the students tend to be really actually much different than they would be in a regular school. So we have something that's really kind of fascinating mirror image in a sense. It's the same, but it's not. So I'm going to leave that to everybody. And so we will close out tonight, and we are having some technical difficulties. So Philip, I say goodbye, and to all of you, we will see you next week. Bye-bye.